Let me change my microphone. So if at any point you're having a hard time hearing me, let me know. I am trying out a different microphone today, so please chat in. Thank you all so much for being here. How is everybody doing? It is, October 30th. Tomorrow's Halloween. Sunday is Dia de Muertos. Lots of really important holidays coming up for a lot of us. So thank you all so much for being here. By the way, today's live stream is just for you guys to be able to ask your questions about moving to Mexico. I'm going to try to spend a little bit more time than I usually do, just to be able to answer a lot of questions, because you guys have so many when we come to these live streams, which I'm so thankful for. So start posting your questions now, because after all, this is for you. Somebody had a question. I'm gonna lead with this, and I'm gonna lead with it because I have a special that I want everybody to know about. But somebody is asking if they can get access to our recommended contacts and the information in the online guide without having to spend $495. And the answer is no. You do get a complete package when you buy the complete Mexico relocation guide. In the guide, we give you a step-by-step online course on how to move to Mexico. We keep it continuously updated because, Mexican bureaucracy changes very quickly. And we give you a directory of recommended contacts that I have personally vetted. But I want to give you all a special, because we're offering $50 off for a limited time if you use coupon code WOW10MRG at checkout. So let me put it in the comments for you guys if you're interested in taking advantage of that. Use coupon code WOW10MRG at checkout. If you want to check out, you need to go to mexicorelocationguide.com/guide, which I have also put in the comments. All right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get to some questions. So, Adam, how are you? Thank you so much for being here. So Adam is asking, what is the official required procedure for either a temporary or permanent resident holder to cross in and out of the Baja land crossing, or any land crossing, right? I hear conflicting information about what is actually needed to check in and out. So yeah, there's a lot of conflicting information out there. So technically, you are required as a temporary or permanent resident to register your exit when you leave Mexico. At the airport, it's a little bit easier because the airlines will usually do it when we'll actually tell you when you're checking in for your flight, like that you need to go to INM, or that you need to stop by the INM kiosk or the INM office. Of course, it depends on which airport you go to, what time your flight is leaving. Sometimes those INM offices are not manned, sometimes they're not open if you're leaving very early in the morning or very late at night. Don't worry, if that is the case and the airline allows you to board the flight, not a big deal. Just try not to make it a habit to not register your exit. For land borders, though, it's a little bit different. Not all land borders have INM offices, and you are supposed to register your exit, but obviously land borders are a little bit less consistent with how they apply the standard operating procedures, or what should happen. So it's not unusual for a land border agent to just kind of wave you through. Let me take off my notification so I'm not getting interrupted. But it's not uncommon for them to just wave you through. And if that happens, it's not the end of the world. Don't worry about it. The only time you absolutely have to stop by immigration or INM, look for those letters, is if you are a temporary or permanent resident who is coming to Mexico for the very first time since you've been approved by a Mexican consulate to do what is called canje, which means exchanging that residency sticker that you get on your passport for an actual residency card. So if this is your very first time entering Mexico and you're coming through a land border, it is crucial that you need to go to an INM office, because they're going to give you what is called an FMM, which is a very short word for forma migratoria múltiple. And it's basically a form that you get to be able to then show to immigration that you came in and be able to get your residency card. Without that FMM, you cannot finish the process. And some people make the mistake of coming through a land border and not stopping at immigration and then they have to either drive all the way back, or sometimes facilitators are able to help them out, not all the time. So please just don't make that mistake if you're coming in for canje. But for you, Adam, it sounds like you already have your temporary residency card or your permanent residency card. So like technically there wouldn't be a big deal if you stop by immigration, or if you cross a land border and you don't register your entry with immigration. But you are supposed to register your exit. And you know, it's kind of like a 50-50 chance. I always tell people you should absolutely stop by immigration anyway, INM on your way out, just in case on that one time that agent decides to follow through. So yeah, most of the time you might get waved through though. Thanks for being here, Adam. Hey, Sharon. So yeah, this is a good question. How will the digital implementation in Mexico affect those moving to Mexico? So I assume you're talking about the new digital CURP. And the truth is, I am not the expert on the digital CURP. I mean, I know that they have announced it as of July 2025. And President Sheinbaum has come out and said that it will not be made mandatory. She cannot possibly obligate people to get a digital CURP. She does suggest that everyone do it. It would be better for everyone because, you know, it'll be easier for them to be able to open bank accounts, sign up for social programs like IMSS or Bienestar, or, you know, anything that is federally funded and federally run will require most likely a digital CURP in order for you to follow through with that process. Now, there's talk that some immigration procedures will also require this digital CURP, but here's the big caveat, okay, Sharon? As with anything in Mexican immigration, Mexico's really good about having the vision of trying to update its systems and get with the times and, you know, modernize a lot of its infrastructure. But in practice, it's very different. So some cities might have these modules set up and running very efficiently, and some rural areas might not. So it all depends on probably where you're going to live. The implementation technically won't start until February of 2026, which is when they have said that, you know, most likely they'll have the infrastructure throughout these cities to have these modules to be able to do like an iris scan and a finger, like biometrics, and be able to, you know, change the CURP that you get on your residency card into the new digital CURP. So I'm going to wait and see what happens actually in February. I don't want to give anybody, first of all, you know, it's above my pay grade. The government doesn't tell me what they're going to be doing. And based on my research, this is all I know. I would say kind of like when they rolled out the RFC and the Registro Federal de Contribuyentes, which is basically your tax ID number in Mexico. And they made it mandatory that anybody over the age of 18 who is legally residing in Mexico needs to apply for an RFC. And at the beginning, a lot of people didn't apply for it because they didn't really have the need. Like they weren't going to be buying a new car or opening a bank account or doing a lot of these things that were kind of through the grapevine heard that you were going to absolutely need an RFC for. And today, that's a very different story. So that was back like in 2022. Now in 2025, more and more institutions are requiring that RFC for you to be able to finalize a transaction, like buy a new car or be able to open a bank account, or different things like order packages and be able to receive packages, and a lot of different things that that RFC is required. Same thing with the digital CURP is what I suspect will happen. It will take probably some years, if at all. So I think first we have to wait and see how many people actually adopt it, how many people sign up for it, how many people actually process it, what procedures are going to be, will you be required to have this new digital CURP? Like, will it be for opening bank accounts? Will it be just for federal programs, which maybe a lot of you won't need to do that digital CURP? So we will have to wait and see. That is my overall theme with this. But yeah, thank you for asking that question, Sharon. Oh, Anastasia, thank you. Yeah, I hope that you're able to, you know, jump in whenever you can. So, by the way, if any of you need to jump out, need to jump back in, this is all recorded and always available for replay, either on my YouTube channel or on our Facebook page. So if you ever watch any one of these and you need to jump out and you're scared you're going to miss the information, they're always recorded. You can jump back in and find the latest Q&A. Let's see. Are there any rentals available for short term, 1 through 6 months? Yeah, when people ask this question, it's usually because they're scouting different areas, and I get it. You don't want to have to rent something long term if you're still kind of looking around and not sure if this is a place you're going to be living in full time, or maybe you're looking for a full time or a long term rental, but in the meantime you have to find a short term rental. So first and front end, I always say Airbnb. I mean, despite how much sometimes I hate it because it has really high fees, and you could probably find a short-term rental if you were able to somehow work with that landlord directly and negotiate a better price. But they are very convenient too. I mean, for starters, you can transact directly on the site. You can see reviews. You can see pictures, at least, of what to expect. They do have like an insurance policy. So if the description of the listing doesn't match the place that you're actually lodging in, you can ask to get your money back. I've personally had to do that, and Airbnb is very responsive. They really, really have been. So I was really impressed. So anyway, they have a lot of protections. And even though I do think that their fees are really high, you're paying for convenience. So first and foremost, there's Airbnb if you're looking for a short-term rental. And yeah, anything under 6 months, I would consider a short-term rental too. Sometimes you might find some realtors that handle rentals that might know of some month-to-month rentals. It's not really the most common type of rental that a realtor will handle, because usually they want a long-term rental. Landlords usually won't pay a commission or like a finder's fee to these realtors if the realtor can only get them a month-to-month rental. So they usually want somebody who can rent long-term. But that's not to say that it doesn't exist. I also think there's a lot of Facebook groups. They're usually in Spanish, but there's a lot of Facebook groups where people, landlords or homeowners, will post a furnished rental that is going month to month, or sometimes they're vacation properties, especially in touristic beach areas, or maybe either touristic mountain towns, which people tend to travel to for the weekend or just to spend like, Semana Santa or an extended week. So there's a lot of creative ways for you to find short-term rentals outside of Airbnb. Those are my suggestions. If you go to something like Renta Vacacional, which I will put into the comments because I know some of you are going to be like, how do you spell that? If you put that into like a Facebook search, Renta Vacacional, and the name of city, you might see some rentals that go for like 1 week, or they'll tell you the rate per night, and they're usually some homes and they're nicely furnished, but you might pay about the same amount as Airbnb. Just depends on where you're going. But yeah, there are plenty of short-term rentals. There are plenty of vacation rentals all across Mexico, which is usually why, Airbnb is very popular. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here. So to meet the investment requirement for temporary residency, do you have to be taking withdrawals already? Everything regarding economic solvency and the requirements for residency, whether it be temporary or permanent, varies a lot by consulate. So you might be applying in one consulate that says, we want $70,000 in your savings or investment accounts for the past 12 months. You have to be showing that you have at least this minimum balance of $70K for the last 12 months. And all they need is the 12-month bank statements showing at least that minimum balance. Obviously, there might be some fluctuations. Some months you might have higher, some months you might be like just at that amount, which is okay. Some consulates will say, no, we want to see that you're truly living off of your investments and that you're truly living off of your savings. I don't think that's very common, but they do have some level of autonomy to be able to decide that for themselves. The consulates are usually pretty good, though. They've gotten better throughout the years at posting exactly what their requirements are, like being very plain and straightforward, black and white on what their requirements are, so that you can show up and be as prepared as possible. However, that's not to say that the consulate can't make slight tweaks on the day of your appointment, or slight requests that maybe weren't written and kind of left ambiguous on their website. So if you have that question, or if you have this type of like conundrum of like, do I need to already be taking money from my investments or from my savings and showing that this is, basically what I live on, I would say it's best to really research the requirements straight from the consulate's website. So whatever city it is that you're looking to apply in, I would go and search that information from that consulate. You would need to do a Google search for Mexican consulate name of city. And as long as the URL ends in .gov.mx, then you know it's a legit government site. So something very important for you guys to keep in mind, that not all sites on the search results are legitimate. So yeah, I hope this is helpful, Michelle. By the way, if any of you ever have a question like that and you're not really sure which consulate you're going to apply in, because there are many consulates that allow you to apply even if you don't live in that vicinity or that municipality or that zip code or that area. So there's plenty of consulates that allow out-of-state applicants. And sometimes there's this thing called consulate shopping, and you might be able to go to one consulate that has more lenient requirements and maybe the consulate that's directly in your state. Like, for example, a lot of you Californians, that your consulates tend to be very strict, or maybe a lot of you in Canada too, which your consulates tend to be very strict too. So if you have the ability to travel elsewhere and the consulate that you're willing to travel to allows out-of-state applicants, I would suggest that maybe you look at that as an option. But if you don't really know which consulate is right for you, because this is your financial situation and it differs from the typical financial situation that you hear online, or what we have written in the Mexico residency guide, that's where I really suggest that you work with an immigration facilitator who can help you with the initial part of the process. And that is sometimes sitting down with you. First of all, they have a lot of experience throughout the years of working with like dozens of consulates across the United States and Canada, and sometimes the world, depending on the facilitator. But they have a lot of experience with this, and sometimes they can look at your financial situation or your overall situation and say, you know what, I think this consulate might be the one right in your city, but it might not. But they might say, hey, this consulate is the one that's really best for your scenario. This is where I've had a lot of success, or whatever it is that their experience is with that specific consulate. Or they might give you a list of consulates that might be a good option for you to apply in. So that's where I really suggest that hiring a really good immigration facilitator can be in your best interest. One, they're not very expensive. Two, they can also help you schedule the initial consulate appointment. And three, they'll help you with the entire process on the Mexican side, which is, you're not done once you're done at the Mexican consulate site. The second part of the process takes place in Mexico, and that's a whole other level of bureaucracy. So it's not, I don't want to make it seem like it's absolutely necessary for you to hire an immigration facilitator. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people that have done it without a facilitator. But I also have seen a lot of people make mistakes. And I think a facilitator can take so much stress off your back. So at the end of the day, it's just, how much is your time worth to you? And would you rather have somebody who, this is their whole like bread and butter, like this is what they do, this is their expertise, this is what they do day in and day out. So I would just say, you really have to just consider, is it worth it for me to hire somebody to walk me through the process and give me peace of mind that I will have the highest level of success? They can't guarantee that you will get approved, but they can guarantee that you will at least have all your paperwork in order and come very prepared to your appointments. So yeah, I hope that helps. If you want more information on the immigration, the residency visa process, I have a free guide, which I'm going to share with you guys real quick. So if you go to mexicorelocationguide.com and you go to free resources, you can go to our residency visa guide. It's a free guide that walks you through, the basics, but very important information that really isn't shared in many other places of the process, starting from how long are you allowed to stay in Mexico on a tourist visa, what are the solvency requirements, what is the process for family unity, what if you have Mexican parents, what if you are the child of a Mexican, what if you have Mexican parents for dual citizenship or dual nationality, and then a lot of other things. So which, by the way, we're going to be changing this pretty soon because there's a new formula, which I know that you guys have heard of, that we're expecting to see the consulate start applying in 2026. So that one gets consistently updated too. So if you go to mexicorelocationguide.com, residency visa guide, you can find that there. If you're interested in knowing what an immigration facilitator is, how we vet the ones that we have in the guide, how much they charge, what you can expect from them, I wrote a guide on immigration facilitators, so that's also completely free and available to you. All right, let's get back to the questions. Okay, so let's see. Dawkins, how are you? Thanks for being here. We received our residencia temporal visa 2 weeks ago, and we plan to drive to Querétaro to begin our new life. That's awesome. But would like to spend time in some other cities. Totally understandable. So how do we keep an address for the visa while exploring? This is a great question. And I don't think I covered this enough. So technically, immigration requires you to have an address, right, when you apply for your canje. So when you go to immigration that very first time to replace your residency stamp for a residency card, you will have to write down an address. Some immigration offices will require an actual proof of address, like I know Playa del Carmen and maybe also Puebla require a CFE bill. Not all of them do. In fact, most of them don't. I'm pretty sure Querétaro doesn't. But if they do, you can talk to your facilitator and they can usually lend you one. Or if you have an address that you are staying at, like maybe an Airbnb or another short-term rental, usually landlords are, like, it's very common in Mexico for you to need to have a CFE bill for many things. Your CFE bill is your electricity bill and doesn't have to be in your name. So it's not unusual for people to like lend them out. Okay. So just don't worry if like you don't have a permanent address yet. But technically, immigration requires you that if you move from that address, you are technically required to change your address with immigration within 90 days of that move. However, like, what happens if you're moving and you're not really sure where your permanent landing will be yet? Like, you're landing in Querétaro, but you're going to be exploring maybe San Miguel de Allende. Maybe you'll spend some time in Aguascalientes, or maybe you'll go to Guadalajara or Mexico City or what have you, right? Like you don't plan to make Querétaro your final place, like your permanent address. In that case, I would say it's fair for you to change your address with immigration as soon as you have a permanent address. It's also very important that if you are borrowing an address, so you're staying somewhere short term, that you write down the address that you used initially to do your canje, because you will be asked for that address again whenever you do a change of address, or whenever you do a renewal, or whenever you do any changes of status with immigration, like if you were divorced or you have some other status change. So it's very important, especially for those who, like, this isn't your permanent address, so you wouldn't have it memorized or you wouldn't have it saved. Very important for you to save that address when you do your initial canje, because you will be required to have that in the future. So yeah, to answer your question, Dawkins, I would just change the address with immigration as soon as you can. So what happens if you don't change your address, right? Like what could possibly happen? Well, immigration does sometimes do random house checks, and they do happen. They happen very randomly. They are very sporadic. They're not common, but they can happen. And if they do happen, then you can get fined. The fine is currently about, last time I checked, it was like $500. And, nobody wants to have to pay a fine. And plus, you don't want to have any sort of negative flags on your application, just in case for in the future when you do a renewal or something, right? Like, it's just best that you don't have that. So that is potentially, I want you to know, like, also the risk that you could be taking. But I get it. Yeah, you're scouting the area and you're looking for your final permanent home. So I would say just change your address as soon as you possibly can when you have a permanent address. Because you don't want to be changing like your immigration address with every single short-term rental that you have. It's not that simple to change your address, first of all. It's not that simple to get an appointment with immigration. It's not that simple to just, change your address. It's not like it's, it's a costly thing. Like it involves a fee. So, just, I would say change your address whenever you have a more permanent address. Hi, Hoku. Thank you so much for being here. So how do you go about getting a familiarization tour? If you want a familiarization tour, scouting tour, private relocation tour, however you want to call it, we have private tour guides in 60 plus different cities. Some of them do tours in multiple cities. So like we don't have 60 plus tour guides, but we have about 50 plus private tour guides. And these are locals who live in the area. We connect you to them. I've talked to every single one of them. I've vetted every single one of them. They know the area. They most likely are already doing this for a living. And they will pick you up usually wherever it is that you're staying in the local vicinity. Unless, for example, like I had a client recently who was going to be going to Todos Santos, but he was actually going to be using Cabo as his home base. So, the private tour guide arranged to pick him up in Cabo, show him around in Todos Santos, and then drop him off in Cabo. So that is sometimes an option depending on the proximity of the two cities and if the tour guide has the ability to, pick you up, drop you off, depending on how long that travel time is. But yeah, the tours are an excellent way for you to get familiarized with the area. They show you neighborhoods, usually based on your budget or your lifestyle or what it is your interests are. It's fully customized to those. So like I've had clients who bring their medications from either Canada or the United States, and they want to see what their equivalents are at a local farmacia, but they need somebody to just kind of, help translate for them, help them see what the process is like. How do they get prescriptions filled? How do they buy things over the counter? Like they just need somebody to give them that know-how. And just as important as it is for them to know what areas might be the best to live in, it's also just as important for them to know what areas they should avoid. So the tour guide can also do that for you. Like they can give you an overlay of like, this is what the city's like. This is how people get around. These are some of the pros and cons of living here. And here, maybe even some neighborhoods that I wouldn't live in. And then here are some neighborhoods based on your lifestyle and what you've told me about yourselves that I would recommend for you guys, right? And then they can give you just kind of an idea of the cost of living in those neighborhoods. Like what do rentals go for? Usually these are not realtors that are doing these tours, because realtors, very rightfully so, will probably want you to rent something if they're going to be doing this whole tour, right? Otherwise, they don't want to be like a taxi driver, an Uber driver. They usually want to build their book of business. And I know that a lot of you, when you're doing these relocation tours, aren't really sure yet where you want to live. You're just kind of scouting the area around. I also don't want you to feel awkward about having to tell somebody like, I'm not ready to rent. So my promise to you is that during a relocation tour, there is no agenda to sell you anything. The tour is usually $200 to $300 US a day for two people. And that covers the tour's time, the tour guide's time, their transportation, and then obviously their knowledge, right? Showing you what it's like to live in that city, whether it's Playa del Carmen, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico City, Guadalajara, Ajijic, San Miguel de Allende. We have them in 60 plus cities. So if you're interested in learning more about where our tours take place, you can go to MexicoRelocationGuide.com. /tours. I hope that answers your question, Hogo. All right, let's see. What other questions do we have here? Thank you guys so much for being here, all from Connecticut, Joshua, Texas, all over the place. Louisiana, another Connecticut. Love it. Hi, Brad. How are you? So nice to see you. Yeah, great question, Julie. Would our tour guide be able to give us recommendations for a place to stay when we book a tour? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I would pick their brain, of course. Usually when you book a tour, when you get access to the online guide, you get instant access to the steps to move to Mexico, plus the directory of contacts. And the directory of contacts is broken down by city. So in every city, I tell you, you know, who can do your RFC, who can do your residency visa, who can help you get a driver's license, who can help you register a car, who can help you open up a bank account, who can help you find rentals, and then of course who can do a private tour in that city. So whenever you get the guide, you would reach out to that tour guide directly. WhatsApp is 100% the way I would recommend starting that conversation, unless I have noted otherwise in the guide. But you would send them a WhatsApp message and tell them that you found them in the guide, you're interested in doing a tour. These are the dates that you're most likely going to be in town. And do they have availability, and what can they tell you about their rates and those kinds of things. So I would start that conversation. And when you start that conversation, I would, once you confirm that you are going to do the tour, I would absolutely ask them like, hey, by the way, I'm going to be staying this amount of time. And, you know, these are kind of my likes on my budget. Where would you recommend I stay? So I do think that that should be part of the tour. If you would rather just do that research independently, booking.com is great. Like, it really does have pretty much all the hotels that are, you know, 2 stars and above. Unless you're very adventurous, I probably wouldn't recommend staying at anything less than 2 stars. And even 2 stars might be like, oh, it's not the, you know, it'll be comfortable, but it probably won't be like, you might or might not have towels in your room. That's all I'm going to say. So, you know, booking.com usually has like the kinds of hotels that most people would find comfortable, and they have them in all budgets. So booking.com is really great. I'm not sponsored by any means, but I have found it to be very reliable. Also, it has filters for pet friendly. And so if you're traveling with pets, it's a really good option if you want to see like, where can I find pet friendly lodging? So I hope that's helpful, Julie. So yeah, definitely ask your tour guide for recommendations. Also, I think another way to ask for recommendations that maybe is underutilized is some Facebook groups. Like, there are so many different Facebook groups for every city of things to do, locals in this city. You know, a lot of them are probably going to be in Spanish, but there are some expat Facebook groups that I would recommend that you ask that question in, because there's plenty of people who have probably stayed in a lot of these hotels who can tell you if the reviews that you see on booking.com are accurate. TripAdvisor is another really good one, which I'm pretty sure is affiliated with booking.com. But yeah, you can read people's reviews and see how they rank. Hello, Tony and Rita. We are from Western Canada, and we want to start our temporary residency. So do we start it at a Mexico consulate in Canada, or can we start and finish the process in Puerto Vallarta? Yeah, great question. The entire process depends on how you're applying for residency. So if you're going the economic solvency way, you absolutely have to start at a Mexican consulate. You cannot start in Puerto Vallarta unless one of you is a Mexican national or already a Mexican resident. Then you could start the process at the immigration offices in Mexico. But 90% of you are probably going to start the process at a Mexican consulate, because 90% of you probably don't have family in Mexico or relationships to somebody in Mexico, or, you know, related to somebody in Mexico. So you start the process, the residence visa process, in your Mexican consulate near you. And then once you get approved at that Mexican consulate, you will have 180 days to be able to travel to Mexico and exchange that pre-approval stamp for what is called a residency card. So that's when you finish the process. Once you get that card, you know you're done. For once you enter Mexico in between, so you have 180 days from when you get that pre-approval to travel to Mexico and do the canje. However, once you actually enter Mexico for the very first time with that temporary stamp and you're going to go for canje, you will only get 30 days on that FMM to be able to finish the process. So you have up to 6 months to plan your travel to Mexico, but truly I wouldn't wait until the last minute. I would make sure I give myself at least 30 days to plan my travel of when I'm going to be coming to Mexico to finish that process. Because once you land or once you step foot in Mexico with that stamp, you will be given an FMM for 30 days, which means you have 30 days to finish the process. Also, you have to make sure you get an appointment at immigration, not only in Mexico, but also at a Mexican consulate ahead of time. So process starts at a Mexico consulate, you finish it in Mexico. It sounds like you already know where you're going to finish it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I answer that process and a lot more tips in that free residency visa guide. So if you're interested, Tony and Rita, I would highly encourage that you just take 5 minutes to read through it and understand what the process is like. If you want more step-by-step, like how to do the entire residency visa process, I go into a lot more detail in our complete Mexico relocation guide. And then you also get the benefit of having the directory of my personal recommendations for immigration facilitators across Mexico. So of course I have them in Puerto Vallarta, but we have them in various other cities across Mexico for those of you who are not interested in living in Puerto Vallarta. Yeah, Jazz, great point. Yeah, when he exited Querétaro last month, there was no one at the INM booth and he was told it was okay and no worries. This was at 5:15 in the morning. Yeah, so I would say that don't make a habit of not registering your exit, but you did the exact right thing. You went and found out, you went and investigated, right, to the immigration, INM immigration booth to find out, hey, I'm here to register my exit. Nobody was there. So they just told you to carry on with your day. You did the right thing. What I don't want people to think is that they just don't need to go and register their exit, because that's where you can get in trouble. Sometimes the airline will just push back and tell you, you have to go register your exit. It depends on airports. I know that Mexico City, for example, is very, very gung-ho about getting people to register their exit. And they will just stamp your passport. It's not like a big procedure, stamp your passport and that's it. So yeah, Jazz, you did the right thing. Best Life Abroad. Love the handle name. So how do I get an appointment at the Mexican canje? And do I go through the Mexican resident line? So I assume that you're talking about the Mexican Immigration Office, which is INM, Instituto Nacional de Migración, for any of you who are wondering what all these acronyms mean. So for you to get an appointment with them, you have to do it online. There's a site. I don't know it by memory, but it's in the Mexico Residency Guide. And I also have it in the online guide, of course. But you go online, you make an appointment. Different immigration offices have different appointments available. Like availability is different throughout the country. So in, for example, very popular cities where a lot of foreigners go and do their canje, for example, Puerto Vallarta or Playa del Carmen or San Miguel de Allende or Cabo, appointments can be scarce because they usually get released at 12 a.m. that like every day they release a couple of appointments, and there's so many appointment scalpers that will just get a bunch of appointments even though they don't have applicants and then try to resell them to facilitators. So I know it's unfortunate, but that does happen, and it doesn't happen all over the country. So I don't want you to think that like you don't have a chance of making an appointment, but that's how you would get an appointment. And when you come to Mexico, you would go through the tourist line. I've heard people say different things. I've seen facilitators tell people like you would go through there's no residence sign, by the way, unless actually I know Puerto Vallarta now has like a nationals and residence sign, so it's very clear like where you would go. But there's a lot of airports that will just say nationals and foreigners. Like there's no residents, right? So a lot of people will just go through the nationals line, and then maybe the immigration officer will say, no, you belong in the tourist line. Or maybe they just go in the nationals line and nobody tells them anything, and they get to the immigration officer, and they just register their entry. So I would say if there's a national sign or there's a tourist sign, you would go through the tourist sign. If you're coming in for canje the very first time you're coming to Mexico, please be very, very wary and just pay attention to what is happening with your documentation when you come in. Because I see this happen a lot recently where immigration officials may mark you as a tourist or register your entry as a tourist, and that basically cancels out your residency. There are ways to fix it, but it's a tedious process. It's not very straightforward, and I wouldn't recommend it. It'll delay your entire process. So I would say, please, to avoid that, make sure you're paying attention. Don't be talking to your significant other. Don't be talking to your kids. Try to pay attention to what the immigration officer is doing. Always lead with the residency stamp. Like before you show the pages where it has your beautiful picture and your name, make sure that you lead with that residency stamp, which also has your beautiful picture, but it's very obviously from the Mexican consulate. If you already have your residency card, make sure you lead first with your residency card, then your passport. And whatever you do, if you are a resident living in Mexico or coming to Mexico, you should never use the automatic kiosks, which are these very nice machines that you basically just scan your passport and it automatically gives you a tourist entry permit, which is an FMM. You do not want that, because if you get entered as a tourist, you will also invalidate your residency visa. So make sure you talk to a human, number one. And number two, make sure that you lead with your residency stamp or your residency card. Make sure that they do not mark you as a tourist. Okay. You definitely don't want to have to deal with having to fix that. It's not the end of the world if it happens. I know people have had it fixed right then and there at the airport. They go talk to the head of, the immigration or the immigration authorities when you come in, and they've had it fixed, but not every single time has it been that straightforward. So. Hey, Travel Happy Lady. Thank you so much for being a customer. That's awesome. She says the guide is worth every penny. I have my temporary residency until 2028 thanks to the guide. That's awesome. I love it. Which, by the way, brings me to another point. So somebody asked recently, I don't know what the question was, but I thought about it and I didn't think about it again. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you all is make sure that you look at the expiration dates on your temporary residency. Dates in Mexico are formatted different than dates in the United States. So you will notice that, for example, in Mexico, we will do the date first, the month, then the year. In the United States, you do the month, then the date, then the year. So don't fall into the mistake of accidentally not renewing your residency because you got those two numbers inversed. Make sure that you look at your residency card and don't miss that expiration date. You can start the renewal process up to 30 days before it expires. So definitely don't wait until the last minute. Make sure you plan ahead, especially if you're going to be making that appointment with immigration. And now that you know that appointments can be scarce, you want to make sure you plan ahead. Oh, I love it. Hanging out in Ajijic and having a great time. How's the weather in Ajijic right now? I love it. Which, by the way, we're going to be in Ajijic in February. There's a content creator meetup that some people are putting together, and they've invited me, and of course I'm going to come. But I am also going to be inviting some of you to come if you are in the area. Would love to do a meet and greet. I would love to meet you, first of all. I would love to give you a hug in person. More details about that coming soon. I'm nailing down some specifics before I announce it to everybody. Okay, but yeah, that's coming up in February. Early February is what I'm told. Okay, Lisa, can you suggest 2 cities that are walkable like Playa del Carmen, but not as hot, humid in the summer? Doesn't matter if it's beach or not. Walkable is important. I would say you should check out my playlist of Central Highlands in Mexico on my YouTube channel. I have a lot of videos that I've done that have different cities that probably fit the bill. Like, for example, Puebla. Puebla's pretty big though, so if you're not a fan of huge cities, maybe Puebla's not for you. If you like smaller cities, then maybe Atlisco or Cholula. Ajijic is a great option. San Miguel de Allende. Those are all places that tend to not be as hot year round. Definitely not humid. You know, a lot of people really like Todos Santos, which is very hot in the summer. So maybe that's not what you're looking for. But yeah, I would say that, hey, there's tons of videos that we have done covering different cities across Mexico, specifically for that reason, because I know that Mexico is huge and there's so many cities that I think you guys should know about, that you should consider, right? Because I hear all like the trendy ones come up all the time, but there's more options out there. And it's just a matter of sometimes knowing which ones those are. So anyway, so on our YouTube channel, I have tons of videos covering different cities, and I have them in our playlist. I have them separated by either Central Highlands or beach towns or best places to live. I've also done a lot of interviews with other expats who are living in various different cities across Mexico, so you can hear kind of their perspective on why they chose to live there and what their life is like. Guanajuato is also a very popular city these days with a lot of my audience. Guadalajara is a great city. It's just very big also. But yeah, there's a lot of cities. If you're looking for something that's walkable that isn't exactly the beach, I would say probably some of those. Hi, Sunshine. What is the best way to receive a response from the guide facilitators? So that's a great question. And whether you have the online guide or you don't, you should know that in Mexico and all of Latin America for that matter, WhatsApp is king. So if you're not used to using it yet, I would say get used to it, because you will use it for everything. I mean, to receive notifications from either your bank or when you buy tickets for something, or for inquiring with a lawyer about something, or hiring an immigration facilitator, or asking a private tour guide if they're available. Like, WhatsApp is absolutely king. So if you haven't sent them a message through WhatsApp, I would say please make sure that you do that first, and send them a text message first, because in Mexico it's very common for people to screen their calls if they don't recognize the number, because there's so many scams going on that people have just resorted to not answering their phone if they don't recognize a number. So send a message first. Make sure that you tell them that you found them through the guide. Unless I have written in the guide that they would rather get an email first. Okay, so if I have written that exclusively on their profile in the guide, then try email first. If you're still having a hard time, send me an email. info@mexicorelocationguide.com, and I'll be happy to look into it for you. So you can tell me who you're trying to contact and what's going on, and I'll be happy to look into it for you. Thank you for buying the guide. All right, let's see. Hi, Medium. Thank you for being here. Do you have information for those of us who are citizens? So in my case, I'm a dreamer looking to self-deport and relocate in Mexico. My employer will keep me employed as a Mexican citizen. Is there a guide? No, not really, Medium. So since you're a Mexican citizen, you will always be a Mexican citizen, by the way. Like, Mexico absolutely allows you to be a dual citizen, but in your case, I know you're not as a dreamer. But you don't have to go through like a residency visa process. You would bring your birth certificate to a Mexican consulate and show that you are a Mexican citizen and therefore process your passport. Um, Once you have your passport, you can travel to Mexico freely anytime you want, and within Mexico, you can travel freely. As a Mexican citizen, you also have more benefits than a lot of foreigners, which is, for example, you're able to buy property in some of the restricted zones without having to have a fideicomiso. It'll be a lot easier for you to open a bank account, set up utilities, a lot of things that some foreigners initially will have a hard time with. It's not impossible, by the way, for all of you who are watching this and are not Mexican citizens. You can do all those things, but sometimes you'd have to jump through more hoops because you are a foreigner. So I don't have a guide specifically for people who are Mexican citizens and looking to move back to Mexico. But I will tell you that I do have a lot of customers that still utilize a lot of the information in the online guide because I get it. You've probably never lived in Mexico. Like you were born in Mexico, but then you got moved to the United States. You've never lived in Mexico, so you don't know what the process for a lot of things is like. So I think a lot of the information in the guide would still be very relevant to you. At the very least, the directory of contacts would be very helpful to help you find rentals, to help you apply for an RFC, to help you open a bank account, to just kind of walk you through the process of getting a driver's license, maybe doing a private tour. So a lot of those contacts that you might not have, even if you speak the language, I have hundreds of people who speak fluent Spanish and they still buy the guide because Mexican bureaucracy is not that straightforward, even if you're fluent in Spanish. So I don't know. I hope that helps you. It's not like a specific guide for dreamers, but I think a lot of the content in there will help you regardless. I hope that helps. I love your name, by the way. So Medium is one of my favorite names. William, is Merida considered a high-end place to live for a U.S. expat? Merida, as a holistically, the state of Yucatan is one of the lower earning states. So for the local people, for like the working class, right? It's one of the lower earning income states. So like the infrastructure is really good in Merida. Like it has great hospitals. It has a really good airport. The streets are nice, but there's also like a disparity between the nice neighborhoods and then the low end neighborhoods. So it all depends where in Merida you're going to be moving to. I just want you to be aware that yes, you can live a very high end life. There's very high end malls. There's very high end like restaurants, and there's people with a lot of money that live in Merida. But you will also see a lot of disparity with people who don't have a lot. And I think that's true for, basically most of Yucatan. However, I saw a report recently that Merida was considered one of the top 4 most expensive cities to live in Mexico. And of course, I think it also made the ranking of one of the top most expensive cities because the purchasing power tends to be generally low, but the cost of living is getting really high in Merida. So for those who don't earn a lot of money and are kind of on that lower end of that working class, it's very hard for them to be able to find rentals and buy homes and just in general be able to, spend a lot of money. So is it a high-end place to live? Yes, in some neighborhoods it's very high-end, and in some areas it might not be. It just depends on where you're going. It's not like if I was thinking of the highest end places to live in Mexico, Merida wouldn't automatically come up as number 1 in my mind. San Pedro in Nuevo León would be number 1 by all means, by far. It's like, the highest end city of all of Mexico, and I'm sure maybe a lot of you have heard of it. It's right. It's a lot of people just consider it kind of like a neighborhood of Monterrey. And then, I think of like Guadalajara and Mexico City. And, even though Merida in that recent survey that I'm telling you guys about, or that recent study, ranked higher than Mexico City as expensive. And again, I think it's because the wages are lower. So that's how I interpreted that list. But if you're curious, William, I would suggest that you visit. Nothing is going to replace boots on the ground for any of you. Not any of my videos or anybody's videos or anybody's opinion. Your opinion is the only one that matters. So how you feel about a place when you actually land and when you are dining out and you're walking around and you're going to a grocery store and you look at some rentals, nobody is going to replace that experience for you. So I would suggest that if you're curious about any city as a possible place to live, you should absolutely visit first. All right, let's see. Let's see, Sharon. Coming for the first time for canje. When do you get the FMM and go to INM? Is it when you are leaving the US or when you arrive in Mexico? What if you have an early morning flight and no one is there? So if you're coming for the very first time to do your canje, which means you got a pre-approval at the Mexican consulate and now you're exchanging that for a residency card, you would get your FMM, which is again, Forma Migratoria Múltiple. If you're flying, I assume that you're flying. It's a digital FMM, by the way. You don't get a paper. Only when you cross a land border do you get a paper. So when you're flying, you're going to be asked to scan a QR code, which will take you to a website which is where you can download your FMM. You would go to the immigration offices or INM, one, when you have an appointment. So you would need to have an appointment scheduled beforehand, unless they take walk-ins, and more offices are requiring appointments beforehand, and less offices are allowing walk-ins, with some exceptions. Like, for example, Mazatlan still allows walk-ins. So you would go to INM on the next, either when you have an appointment, and if you don't, you're planning to do a walk-in on the very next business day. So Monday through Friday, assuming it's not a holiday. That's why you have to be, you have to kind of be aware of what important Mexican holidays are coming up. Because from now until like January or February, we have a lot of different holidays coming up. So yeah, when you arrive in Mexico, you get that FMM. If you're flying, it'll be digital. You'll scan a QR code. If you are driving in, you have to stop at an office that has the letters INM, that's immigration, and then you show them your stamp and you will get a paper FMM, which is what you need to bring to your immigration appointment to do your canje and get your residency card. So I hope that's a little more clear. Terry, thanks for being here. Hey, so question about what is a recommended monthly income that you recommend? Understanding, depending on lifestyle a person has, like for Cabo or PB. Yeah, this is very hard, Terry, because I don't know how you live. I don't know what your lifestyle's like. I can tell you that I know people living very comfortably in either Cabo or Puerto Vallarta on $2,500 a month. And I also know people living on over $7,000 a month. So it's all over the place. And you can definitely spend a lot of money living in Mexico. You can also live very frugally. You can probably spend a lot less than $2,500 a month. I know people living in some of the very touristic parts of Mexico, like Puerto Vallarta, for example, or even San Miguel de Allende, on $1,500, $1,800 a month. But I also know that they're not living like very luxuriously, right? They're probably renting a very basic 1-bedroom casita, probably have to walk a lot further than they would if they lived a little bit more centrally, or they have to take taxis because they live on the outskirts. They're probably not eating out all the time. So it just depends. I will say, though, that I think it doesn't matter where you live in Mexico. I do think that, well, I should take that back. It's not true, because there are some cities where your money will go further. Like there's no doubt about it. It's not the same to live in Jalapa or, parts of Veracruz than it is to live in parts of, Querétaro. So I will take that back. But I will say that I can almost guarantee that almost anybody can live comfortably on at least $2,500, $2,000, $2,500 anywhere in Mexico. And I say that just keeping in mind that it depends where you live, Your housing is going to be one of the most important things. So it's very important that you know what the true cost of things is. Your first year is probably going to be the most expensive as you start figuring those things out. So just expect that your first year, you're probably going to have an elevated cost of living. And once you actually live in Mexico longer and longer, you will know what the true cost of things is. Are you paying the fair amount for rentals, for your rental? Are you paying the fair amount for your produce? Are you paying the fair amount for your taxis? Are you paying the fair amount for your services? Like for the lady who might come and clean your house. So other things are set, right? Like your electricity bill, your internet, your water, your gas, those kinds of things are pretty set fees. Like, you won't get like gringo price. But everything else, like in rentals and produce, especially in some of the more touristic cities where a lot of foreigners do tend to live, it's not unusual for some locals to raise prices on foreigners because they just think that you have more purchasing power, which is most of the time true. I'm not saying it's fair or right, but it is usually true. So once you actually live in an area, I would say even maybe 6 months, you will start to know what the true cost of things is. So I think that's kind of a long answer to your question, but I think it's the most sincere one I can give you. It just depends on your lifestyle, really. I can't give you like a definite, oh, you only need this amount to live. I will say, if you qualify for residency on the monthly income requirement, you will live very comfortably anywhere in Mexico. So if you qualify on the $4,300 a month that is currently required to apply for a temporary residency, you will live very comfortably anywhere. If you're living on your savings and, the current requirement is $70,000 for the last 12 years, so you have to hold at least that minimum balance for the last year. Not 12 years, 12 months, sorry. It's a little bit harder because, $70,000 isn't a lot of money. Like most likely a lot of us would run out of money. But I will say, like, if you qualify on the monthly income requirement, you will live a very comfortable life in Mexico. So yeah, sorry I can't give you a better answer. Yeah. Hi, Greg. Thanks for being here. So if I have my temporary residency card, how would the process work to get my partner his temporary residency card for family unity? So first and foremost, congrats for having your temporary residency card. That's awesome. You would have to make an appointment at immigration. You would do what is called vínculo familiar, and you would need to bring proof that you guys are legally married. And then, usually that marriage certificate, no, not usually. Right now, all marriage certificates need to be apostilled, which means you should do that before you move to Mexico because it needs to be done at the State Department in your country, and in the US, the State Department. For Canada, it would need to be done by, I don't remember what the authority office is for Canada, but they do apostilles now too. I'm pretty sure it's just the main government. Yeah, authentication of documents. Yeah, it's not like the State Department. So just, you would Google apostille in Canada and you can get that done through your local government. But I really recommend that you get that done before you move to Mexico because you will absolutely need it for your immigration documents if you are doing family unity. And if you're not doing family unity, I still recommend that you get your marriage certificates apostilled. You might need them to do things like write wills, maybe for a fideicomiso if you're going to be adding your partner as part of the fideicomiso and like as part of the will in that you're allowed to do on a fideicomiso. So you will need it at some point. Apostilles do not expire. If you need more one-on-one help with what the process is like, I do recommend hiring an immigration facilitator, especially for family unity. I think family unity this year has been especially hard and more documents are required, or at the very least, immigration seems to be stricter on not only the documents that are required, but even the process itself. So I would highly recommend working with a very good local immigration facilitator in the city where you plan to do your family unity. If you need a recommendation, of course, I have a directory full of them. But if you're going to be doing your own vetting and your own investigation on hiring a facilitator, make sure you hire a good one. I see so many people being con artists and they have no idea what they're talking about. They give people terrible advice. So just like, please just try not to get scammed. And they're really good at conning people. So, I've done that research for you, but if you want to do the research on your own, I wrote a guide on immigration facilitators, so at least know what you should be asking them. All right, I'm going to take a few more questions. Let's see. Regarding the updating of your current address in Mexico, as a permanent resident, I enter and leave Mexico every 4 or 5 months, rotating places that I stay. So yeah, I just answered this earlier, Chris. I would say that as soon as you have a more permanent address, you should make that change of address with immigration. They do sometimes do random house checks. So at the very least, if you're going to be rotating places, you might want to tell the person that you're staying at for 4 or 5 months. Maybe you build a relationship with them to just vouch for you that you actually live there. I hate to tell you that. I hate to tell you to like not say exactly the truth because I don't want you to get in trouble. But I want you to also know the risk of what can happen if you get randomly chosen as a house check. So yeah, that's my advice, is just make your permanent change as soon as you know what your permanent address will be. I have a couple of tips over here that I wanted to bring to your attention. One, I just recently wrote a blog post on getting a driver's license in Mexico. So federally wise, there is no mandate for you to have a Mexican driver's license. Your foreign driver's license does work in Mexico. Like it is allowed for you to drive in Mexico on a foreign driver's license, as long as that foreign driver's license is currently not expired. But there are benefits to having a Mexican driver's license. For starters, it's your local ID. The local authorities recognize it more, so might even let you off with a warning if you are, doing something that could give you a ticket or an infraction. So anyway, it's just a better way of having an ID in Mexico, and they're usually not that hard to get. Out of all the documents and all the IDs that you will get in Mexico, probably a driver's license has got to be the easiest one. So I would highly recommend that you check that out. If you go to mexicorelocationguide.com/blog, I share a ton of tips on our blog, not only our videos. So I share all our videos on our blog, but I share tips like how to get a Mexican driver's license and do you really need one, and what is kind of like the use cases of needing one. And I also recently wrote a kind of a quick guide on what the new formula is for 2026, and with some caveats in there that we have to wait until the consulates actually start implementing this formula, because the consulates have the final say. So we will have to wait and see what they say and when they say it. But if you are curious to know what that new formula is and what it might mean for economic solvency for 2026, I highly recommend that you read that blog post, just to give you like a quick snippet of what the new formula is. So currently the income requirements at the current exchange rate are about $4,300 a month for temporary residency, or about $68,000 to $70,000 in savings or investments for the past 12 months for a temporary residency. If the exchange rate stays at 18.4, 18.5, which it has been for the last couple of weeks in 2026, then this formula actually brings down the income requirement slightly. So instead of $4,300, it'll be closer to $4,000 US dollars a month for temporary residency, or about $68,000 US dollars for the last 12 months for a temporary residency and investments or savings. For permanent residency, currently it's at about $7,500 a month for permanent residency if you're going based on income. or about 300, and it varies depending on the consulate. Some require 290, some require 300K, some require 320K. But if this formula goes into effect in 2026 and we have the same exchange rate that we have right now, then we can expect that permanent residency requirements will drop to 6860 a month for monthly income, or about 280,000 US dollars for the last 12 months in savings or investments. And you can use 401ks, you can use brokerage accounts, you can use your savings accounts. Now, for family members, there is going to be a solvency requirement. And at the current exchange rate, it'll be about 1,300 US dollars a month for an applicant or per dependent. So again, we will have to wait and see what the consulates say next year, and if they start implementing this, what it means and what exactly the requirements will be. Hey everyone, sorry. Looks like I lost you all. I had a power outage, so my internet is down. Anyway, perfect timing for me to sign off. Thank you all so much for joining. Let me see. Safety. So yeah, somebody's asking, is there a reason none of the questions about safety? Safety is a very tough one. I personally think that obviously there's a lot of sensationalism on the news about safety. And despite also, a lot of people saying like, I feel safer in Mexico than I do in the US or Canada or wherever it is. I also think that nobody can guarantee your safety, regardless of where you live, whether it be Mexico, the US, Canada, Norway, Denmark, or anywhere. There are definitely some cities that I wouldn't recommend living in or traveling through. And I do have a blog post on what those are. If you join my email list, I also share in my newsletter what some of those cities are. If you live in any of the cities that I recommend on our videos, you'll be fine. But even within those cities, there are places that or neighborhoods that you probably shouldn't be hanging out in, and you'll most likely know which ones those are. So if you have seen any of the videos on my YouTube channel, if I ever promote a city, it's because I think it's deemed safe for you to live there. But at the same time, I think you need to do your due diligence. You need to obviously not leave your brains at the border and follow the same common sense that you would anywhere else, right? So I hope this has been helpful, and please take advantage of that $50 off. So I'm offering a coupon for a limited time. If you use WOW10 MRG at checkout, you go to mexicorelocationguide.com/guide. You can take advantage of that coupon for a short period of time. It gives you $50 off. So thank you all so much for joining me tonight and for being patient while I lost internet. I will see you all soon. Stay tuned for next week. I have a very important guest, and we're talking all about living in Playa del Carmen. So I'll see you guys next week. Feliz Dia de Muertos and happy Halloween.